Unlike other animals, our brains are not fully developed at birth. The downside of this is that we have to be looked after for much longer than other animals. But the upside is that we have much more flexibility to learn. We can learn positive patterns that help us to cope better, or negative patterns that don't serve us as well. So we are born with brain cells able to cope with pretty much any situation that we might find ourselves in. And then there is a pruning process, getting rid of brain cells that are used for tasks that we don't come across. Brain development therefore becomes use dependent. The nerve cells link up in ways that help the person cope with the situations they find themselves in. So, for example, any baby can grow up to learn any language, but they will usually only need 1 or 2 languages. So, if they are born into a world where everybody speaks English, then the nerve cells that pick up the sounds and all the ways of talking English will grow and become strong. And the nerve cells that would have been used for other languages, like, I don't know, Chinese or Arabic, they won't get used and they will die off. What we are left with is a brain that is adapted to fit to the world we live in. So that makes us more specialized to adapt according to the environment that we find ourselves in. And that can be an enormous advantage. It means that if we are born into a healthy, supportive and loving family environment, the nerve cells that will grow and prosper will be the ones that encourage connection and trust. The child will feel comfortable and supported by the people around them. Their body will feel in harmony with the world that they live in. That baby will grow up to be confident and trusting. So the parent's role is to provide that supportive, happy, safe learning environment. Children often don't get brought up in such an environment. Often the parents are burdened with their own problems. They might actually have their own trauma that they are trying to cope with in their own lives. And so the stress and the trauma can get passed on and the child ends up in an abusive or even violent environment. So the abuse might be physical, emotional, mental, sexual or whatever. The child then prepares itself for a world of distrust where promises get broken, where those who are meant to be there to support them and help them are the ones actually causing the harm. Their brain and body is heightened, expecting an emergency situation at any moment. And when this pattern is repeated over and over, the way that the child's brain grows is literally different. Events that happen can then get incorrectly coded in their brain. So, for example, there might have been music that was heard during abuse, or a smell, or a colour, or a shape that was present. All of those can be a trigger, bringing the traumatic memory back to the surface without the person even realizing it has happened. And this can be very painful, so painful that a person will do almost anything to avoid the pain. So alcohol, drugs, food, shopping, sex, all of those can develop into addictions that take away the immediate pain but cause longer term problems that make things even worse. The way the brain was organized made sense for the world the child found themselves in, but when they grow up, often those brain patterns don't work as well. As adults, we all want to have good, loving, supportive relationships with other adults. But if our brain is wired for distrust and hostility, and all the habit patterns that arose during the original abuse, that person may well end up withdrawing, attacking, or becoming codependent and clingy. It makes it hard to maintain a positive relationship when the past patterns keep re-emerging. When a traumatic event occurs, we often try and block it out and push it away. But we've already experienced it. It is already within us. Because we are not able to embrace it as a conscious part of ourselves, the emotion that is related to that event goes into our unconscious being. And later, similar events will trigger the memory of that initial event and the emotion rises up again, usually not in a very good way, and we often end up acting out in unhelpful ways. People's lives can be severely impacted so that even everyday things that most people would take for granted become huge problems. There is help available for people suffering from trauma. There are ways of getting in touch with the suppressed emotions and releasing them. There are ways of working with our thinking so that we can gain control over our thoughts and our decisions. We can build awareness of our situation by building the skills of paying attention to what is happening in our body and in the world around us, and then recognizing that we can choose to act differently in setting up new habit patterns instead of those that have not proved to be helpful in the past.